Hello, future leaders and lifelong learners. Are you ready to dive into the heart of Walsh University and the ever-evolving world of higher education? I'm Teresa Fox, and you're tuned in to CavChats. We're not just talking, we're connecting you to the pulse of our campus and the headlines shaping universities everywhere. Think of CavChats as your backstage pass to the stories, debates, and innovations that matter to you most, right here at Walsh University and beyond. So whether you're a student, faculty, coach, administrator, or just passionate about higher ed, buckle up. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to CavChats. We're so excited to be with you today. We just got finished with a wonderful academic year, topped off by commencement, which feedback has been, it's been one of the most exciting commencements we've had. So we're really excited just to end the year and look forward to a productive year ahead. But I'm delighted today because I have a representative from one of our most signature flagship programs here on campus, Dr. Nick Morris, with us, who spearheads our Blouin Scholars program and has just been doing some wonderful work in this area. And so we want to take a deep dive and talk about our Blouin Scholars today and all about that program. So, Nick, welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't you go ahead and tell viewers who you are, how long you've been at Walsh, and what you do here?
Yeah, I'm actually a Walsh alum. Got my master's degree here back in 2004. I did some adjunct teaching here and had a career, it feels like, or several between then and now. But the Blouin Scholars Program has been part of my work for a number of years. I cited the program in my dissertation.
Oh, wow.
I was really impressed as a community partner working with Blouin Scholars from Walsh years ago. So when the position came open to take the helm, I jumped on it. Um, it's been a great little over 2.5 years now working with the program, getting to know the students, the faculty, the campus, and community in a different light, seeing things from a different perspective, and really kind of have found a bit of a home in the community engaged learning world.
That's awesome. So tell us, what is the Blouin Scholars Program in a nutshell?
Yeah. It's a pretty big nutshell. So, scale me back or tell me to speed up if I'm dragging this on. Uh, the Blouin Scholars Program is an opportunity for students who have an interest in seeing how their skills and interests can contribute to a greater good. So, similar to an honors program on campus, is an additional challenge that students take on. Our university invests in them as for their own personal development, for the contributions to the university, and ultimately the impacts in the community. So the scholarships that students receive are built around the idea of ensuring that Walsh University gets carried into the community in appropriate intellectual ways. So our program is founded on Catholic social teaching. So it's an outreach of the faith that grounds us at Walsh University. I think our students who are both Catholic and identify as such see it as a way to live out their faith in the community. And our students who aren't Catholic find an opportunity to connect with the faith because there's such an open common space in Catholic social teaching. But really, it's about us carrying intellectual service in the community. Service is such a big part of what we do at Walsh.
100% of our students do service.
Exactly. Our students take a different strategy with service. So for us, it's about building relationships and developing investigative questions, because we believe that as engaged students on campus with ties to faculty and research and access to resources that our community partners may not have, we can contribute intellectually in service to our community and make sure that our partners and our community are better off because of our engagement. Not just that, we filled 100 boxes of food today that are going to go out into the community, but because we helped investigate how to do that work better, for example.
That's great. So, as I understand it, with each freshman class, there's a new cohort of Blouin Scholars, and they spend all 4 years tackling a real world problem, right?
That is correct. Yeah, our students, it's one of the unique aspects of our program is that we take students from all different majors. So a lot of universities might have a long-standing relationship with their community in their business school or in their school of medicine. Here at Walsh, students from any major on campus, students who have all kinds of different co-curricular or extracurricular activities, can all contribute. And those students will be assigned a faculty partner and community partners to connect with. within a particular social issue. So we start off with a really big issue. So, for example, poverty and performance in education. That can go a lot of different ways. You can look at how community poverty impacts schools, how family poverty impacts individuals, and just about anything in between. And over the course of the first year, our students dig into that issue. They understand their call to serve. They start to identify how they fit in as part of a community of scholars that can contribute to the greater good. And they start to assess essentially where we might fit in as a group of scholars. So in that particular example, our cohort has shifted in the first year from this big issue of poverty and performance in schools to really looking more at a narrowed area of the age band, which is high school. High school students, especially students who are experiencing poverty, have lots of supports. They may not get them all the time, but they have lots of supports from the community from birth age to school age and from school age to middle school. And then in middle school, they start tapering off a little bit. And then unfortunately in high school, we look at those kids and say, yeah, you're old enough to get a job. So you can go pick one up and help your family out. Well, our students recognize that that's an area that our community isn't serving as much as they are in other areas. So then they narrow their focus down into that target. So then for the next 3 years, really, those students are working in that community space, and they're
Leaving campus, right?
yeah, they're leaving campus. They're working with community partners.
Wow,
We have
that's wonderful.
students that are, we get guest speakers on campus, and then students that break out into small groups and work with individual partners and lots of other things to just try to understand that issue better and then develop research questions. And as they explore those and investigate those research questions, the idea is that we're identifying questions that our community needs answered, and we put our scholarly caps on and go at it. And as part of that, we do some travel study. So, we want to get out into the community, into other communities, and see what's working, what's not working, how their situations are similar and different, and bring that new knowledge back to our community.
That's great. So you could be a visual and performing arts major with just a calling to help serve or explore or problem solve and be a Blouin scholar and tackle this real world issue.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges sometimes is helping students see that they do have a connection to these issues. For example, a student who wants to be an accounting major and is assigned a topic like, poverty and aging in Stark County. Maybe starting to wonder, like, how is this tied to what I'm doing? I'm not a sociology major. But what they find is that their particular skills and abilities as future accountants can contribute to what our partners need in the community to do good work.
That's great. So you just got back from a wonderful trip with these Blouin scholars, at least one of the cohorts. I think the cohort that was focusing on poverty and the impact on education. So tell us about that trip.
It was a great trip. We were gone for 7 days. We traveled first to Ypsilanti, Michigan, and spent some time in that working class community that has a history not too unsimilar from the city of Canton. Working class has gone through its population increases and decreases over the last century, and is trying to identify itself and kind of reshape its future. So working with some partners that are tied to Eastern Michigan University called the Southeast Michigan Stewardship Initiative. They work with schools all throughout Southeast Michigan on place-based education. And place-based education, from their perspective, has a lot to contribute to students who have poverty or schools that are suffering from poverty as a collective community, because it's about identifying where you are and who you are, using the resources at hand to really create engaging new networks of education that really break away from the concept of like kind of cookie cutter, lesson plans and strategies and units, and really take a look at, being able to identify what's unique about your own community and yourself. So our students had a phenomenal experience with them, met some wonderful historians and educators in that community, and were, I think, appropriately motivated to going into the rest of their experience. So from there, we traveled over to London, Ontario, to visit and stay with a partner, King's University College at Western University. King's University College is a Catholic institution in Canada. They are affiliated with Western University, which is a state or a province-run school, so it's a really different way of thinking about Catholic education. So our students both, were surprised and also kind of interested in how that works. And so one of the key reasons why we partnered with a university like that is that in addition to serving our community, I think our students are really on the forefront of what community engaged learning looks like, and specifically from a Catholic perspective. So for us to go and work with King's University and meet some of their community partners, not just for the purpose of learning about poverty and education in their community, but also to really assess kind of this relationship between our university and our community, and what does a university owe its community is one of kind of the big amorphous questions that our students experience over the course of their 4 years.
Sure.
So had some wonderful experiences there with some youth development organizations, some folks that are working on providing basic needs for folks that are having really difficult times in that city, both from the kind of large scale nonprofit that are well funded and well established to kind of the localized community grassroots, like we just need to feed people today. And while they're here and they're getting their nutrition, we're going to give them a sense of safety, sense of community, and connect them to some health resources or housing resources if we can. So our students were able to really see a connection between some of those organizations in Canada and some of the organizations operating here in Canton, compare and contrast a little bit about how those organizations exist within a community. Why is that tied to the government structure, and on some other big picture questions we could get into. We departed from there, went to Erie, Pennsylvania, and collaborated with Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Erie for a few days of work there, where we got to see both how Catholic Charities operates as an umbrella organization, and really served us well, because I think the model that they use to contribute to the good in their community is not unlike what we do as Blouin scholars. One of the challenges that we have is that our students like to serve, so they want to just go in and feed people and clothe people and build things, solve a problem. But our work as a university, our call to serve as scholars is different than that. So Catholic Charities has a model that I think actually kind of gave us a little bit of a vocabulary, a framework for how to roll out Catholic social teaching in a broad way across a community. So there we met with several of their partner organizations and learned about the refugee situations in Erie, and how folks who are coming to our country are integrated and supported as they establish themselves. Why that's important from a Catholic perspective was one of the key questions that our students kept kind of thinking about. Like, I didn't realize this was a Catholic thing. And then, but to be able to be there and meet with those individuals and ask them specific questions and learn about their history, I think is a really great experience. And then our final stop was at a place called Manchester Bidwell in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you're familiar, but in the city of Canton has a history with a process called redlining that has historically been, more closely tied to bigger cities like Chicago and in particular Detroit. The city of Canton has its own history with this, and essentially it was kind of a carving out of sections of town that were to be, developed, or ones that deserve no investment. And that led to a number of kind of domino effects that have had an impact for generations. And in Pittsburgh, this occurred as well. The Urban Redevelopment Authority decided, hey, we need an industrial park, and we need to move a highway. Well, where did they put that? They put that where people had less power. And so in one of those neighborhoods was the Manchester neighborhood of Pittsburgh. And years later, a gentleman by the name of Bill Strickland spoke up and kind of said, hey, we got to do something for this community. There's still people who live here, and we're forgotten. We're carved off from the rest of the city. So he went out and met with the biggest names in business in Pittsburgh and asked them what they did, asked them what their companies do, and asked them what their companies need. And he created this model of job training and career training for individuals in that community, with pipelines directly into high quality careers in Pittsburgh-based organizations. And so it's just a really powerful model for the end of a trip like that, to see such a great nonprofit at work.
I'm sure it was transformational for the students. What feedback did they share?
The students were just, I mean, they were blown away by some of the resources that these young people in Manchester have access to. In fact, the director now, Joanna Papata, she's starting a national think tank on the issue of workforce development, and told our students, I I'm going to share my contact with Dr. Morris and share some information on what I'm developing, and I want to interview you to get your college student perspective on this national issue. So it was really cool to see someone say, what you're doing is important, and you, as young people, as college students who are investigating these things, have something to say
Sure.
as college students, not just when you get a degree and you go off and you start your own career. So that was a pretty powerful moment for our students to hear.
That sounds amazing. So, what do these students do then with all of this valuable information that they've received over the course of these 4 years? What is the ultimate outcome? Is it a report, or do they, what is the impact of this?
The impact of this work is really for us to contribute to the body of knowledge that our community uses to solve a problem. So, starting when I determine what a problem is, I work with community partners like Star Community Foundation and say, hey, here's some ideas I think might have some legs. What do you think? And they work with me on, well, this is a pretty progressive idea. I don't know if you'll find a whole lot of partners working on this. Or, hey, Nick, this is a really important idea, but I think we're saturated at the moment. But there's this other area that has a little bit of momentum. So if you tweak that message or tweak that theme a little bit, you'll get yourself tied to some really valuable partners. And so what we do is we start working with those partners and we start to develop investigative questions that they're, both that we observe and that they help us hone. And then as we go through these experiences of our travel studies, they're carrying those questions with them. So those students who just did that trip, coming back in the fall, they'll begin doing those investigations in the community. They'll take the research questions that they had when they left, what it's now become after experiencing the travel study, and they'll do those investigations in the fall. So our idea is to then produce something that's interpretable for our community. I'm not interested in publishable research. I'm not interested in our students being, having peer-reviewed journal articles. I want them to produce something that the frontline worker, the director, and the board of a nonprofit can look at and go, that is incredibly helpful.
Wow.
So one example of that is with the third year cohort. There's a small group that's been working with Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity is a national brand, international to a certain extent, has such a great history. One of the challenges that they face is that it's really expensive to do their work. And the impact, if you just look at the dollars to family, it's an expensive proposal to build somebody a home. But what they know to be true and what they're asking our students to help with is explore, how does homeownership impact the other issues that families face? So what they then have is a different story to tell. It's not, I just, with your donation, we built a home for this family. It's with your donation, we built a home for this family. And now they have job stability. And now they have better performance in schools. And now they have higher career visions for the young people in the home. Now they have transportation security. There's so many different things that happen after that home ownership takes place that don't always get brought into the story of, how much money are we bringing in? How many houses are we building?
Sure. That's great work that they're doing. So, I'm sure there are some students who this might have changed the trajectory of their career. Do you have any alumni that are former Blouin scholars that have maybe, that are currently sort of doing this full time in terms of the topic that they were studying?
Yeah, for sure. Alex Branham is a recent graduate. He's still a regular on campus. He seems to be over here all the time, and he's a wonderful advocate and ambassador for the program. During the program, he started working with Akron Canton Food Bank on just some of the service work that they were doing, and realized that, hey, there's a career here in this nonprofit world. And now actually Alex has done a phenomenal job of, rising up the ranks pretty quickly over there, but always keeping tied back to the university. So he's a guy I can call and say, hey, Alex, I need a place, or I need a speaker. How can we do something for our Blouins? And he's right there to help me out. So he's somebody who's out there in the field working now in the nonprofit sector because of at least in part because of his experience in the Blouin Scholars Program. Our 2024 Tower Award winner, Hannah Olszewski, she is a nurse in the area now. She's originally from Steubenville, had this idea that she was going to come to Walsh. It's a Catholic university. She was excited about that. Great nursing program, excited about that, and had this idea that, of what her future was going to look like. And as a result of her work in the Blouin Scholar Program, she saw a different future for herself. And so that she started to ask different questions about where she wanted to work and what sort of work she wanted to do. And then it just kind of changed even the way she explored the job opportunities that were available to her. I remember talking to her close to graduation and saying, "So what do you think you're going to do?" And she's like, "Well, I'm weighing these two options." And she was weighing them not just based on, salary and the first couple steps, but how is that organization set up to support the greater community? What's their sustainability, as an organization as it relates to their mission to provide healthcare in a community? And is it tied to, some sort of international investment, or is it tied to what's coming from the local community? So she's asking incredible questions for a person who's just trying to get a first job, and she ties that directly to the Blouin experience. And our most recent graduates, um, uh, Key, she was a soccer player here, pre-law student, really great thinker, really fun student. She just informed me that now wants to go to law school, not just to become a lawyer and figure out where she wants to go, but she wants to work in the realm of human trafficking and exploitation issues. And that comes directly from the topic that she studied for 4 years here in the Blouin Scholar Program. So that has had a direct impact on the type of work she wants to do as a lawyer moving forward.
And these are really heavy, heavy topics.
They
Poverty,
are.
hunger, human trafficking. Wow. I mean, that's a big chunk. No wonder it takes them 4 years.
It's tough it's tough for students sometimes to work through those issues. It was a challenge for that group working in human trafficking, for example, they initially just wanted to go work with victims. And we had to explain to them that this is not something you approach lightly. But our work on the outside can contribute to help the groups that do and are certified to work with those individuals, you know, uh, to do much, much better work. Our students sometimes get a little bit frustrated with the heaviness and the depth of of this work. And one example is we went to St. Joe's Cafe in London, Ontario. St. Joe's is a place where people can go get lunch for 50 cents. And while they're there getting lunch for 50 cents, there's, some healthcare professionals who can, address a few basic things, or at least encourage, movement towards the clinic because they've got a wound that needs taken care of or something like that. When we pulled up to St. Joe's, the entire yard was filled with folks waiting for their meal. There were tents set up. The parking lot was filled with individuals. And when I say individuals, I'm talking about folks that are really struggling. These are people that our students don't connect with on any sort of regular basis. And in fact, there's images of illicit drug use taking place at a location like that. And our students initially kind of um, stiffen up about how do we walk into this place? Is this safe? And what they realize after being there and listening to the director, Tracy, is that, our challenge to recognize human dignity as part of our faith and a part of just being a good human is challenged in those situations. But what they found was in interacting with Tracy is that she sees her work as creating a safe space and a community for individuals who otherwise feel completely alienated. And, so she was even talking about how she recognized that this was a Monday. She recognized that there must have been a homeless encampment that was broken up over the weekend because they hadn't been this busy. And so our students were like, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. And then she said, yeah, we're having a lot of issues with this new fentanyl. And our students were like, huh. And I saw their heads kind of turn. And then about an hour later, we're eating lunch, and two of them walked up to me and they said, hey, I thought fentanyl's been around for a while. And I said, well, it has. I said, but what you don't recognize is that Miss Tracy is actually talking about the new fentanyl, as in the shipment that came in last week.
Wow.
Or, so it's her perspective. What our students were getting is that, like, yeah, from people who don't interact with this world, we see fentanyl as this kind of thing that is in the media that we hear about. It's present. But people like Tracy work day to day with individuals who struggle with addiction issues. And so what she sees is literally that a new shipment came in and has created this additional burden for her organization. And so our students get it and a completely new perspective on a social issue and recognize that there's people who are working on the ground trying to provide support and safety for those individuals. So it is heavy and it's difficult, and we work to try to prepare them for it, but then we also work to then like kind of talk things down a little bit. And our challenge in some cases is to say, how are we connected to these things? How do we, as students at Walsh University, with all the privilege that comes along with it, actually contribute?
Right.
What can we do to make something better for someone? And what we realize is that we're intermittent partners with a group like St. Joe's. So what we can contribute is when we do research, when we find partners in our community, we connect Miss Tracy in London, Ontario with Refuge of Hope in the city of Canton and say, hey, you don't know each other, but you're doing similar work and we appreciate you both. And we'd love for you to know each other.
Sure.
Sometimes just doing that gives us an opportunity to say we've made a connection that can be of value to someone.
And I'm sure it speaks to just the impact it can have from just reading something in a book in a classroom to getting out there in the community, seeing it firsthand, having a visceral reaction to it. It could really shape your perspective in a way that it wouldn't have if you were in a classroom hearing about it from a professor.
Well, that's the benefit of community engaged learning. I mean, you've heard of things like service learning for years, or community service, or experiential learning. All of those things kind of coalesce around this idea of community engaged learning. And what we're trying to do that it happens in program based or course based work more directly around connecting theory with reality. And, but we're seeing it in these very big issues. And so our students are now getting, they see people who are working on the front lines to address issues. You know, in Erie, for our students to meet with refugees and hear their stories, and for our students to learn about what that experience was like, they now know when they hear the term refugee in the news that it's a different category of individuals coming into our country. And they know more information behind it, not just more information behind it that they can learn in a classroom, but they know Jamal. They know Jamal, who has come here from Iraq and is struggling to find work because he's got a master's degree from a college in Iraq, but is faced with taking very basic jobs here in the U.S. and going through that cultural challenge and that personal challenge and envisioning a future here in the U.S. for himself. You can't teach that in a classroom. You can't even bring Jamal into a classroom and have him speak to students. You got to go to the place where his family showed up on day one to figure out where to go for basic help and who is safe in the community and who's not to talk to. And so just a really phenomenal experience as you get when you realize that our communities are classrooms. The partners that we have are professors. The people that they serve have stories to tell our students. And like that's the biggest benefit that I have in the program is that I get to teach our students that they have so much to learn from people who don't have letters after their name or who don't, they're not standing behind a podium. They're just out working in the community. And I get to put the best educators in front of my students every year. And it's the most fun I have.
That's wonderful. Well, it seems like it definitely is different from a traditional academic scholars program. So what makes this program unique?
Well, it's the 4-year piece. Most if programs have or if universities have programs like this, Loras College, for example, I think they're in Iowa. I've met with folks from there. They have a program that their students go out in the community. They study social issues. It tends to be a first year, maybe second year type of program, and then they have an option for some travel. So I looked at that and thought, wow, that's really similar to what we do, but it's not deep. They're going out and they're doing great work, but they do it for a short time. Um, the fact that we have interdisciplinary teams of students, and so that means you and I with two very different different perspectives can sit in a room together and say, all right, Nick, with your biology and environmental background and community-based education background, and Teresa with your marketing and those sorts of backgrounds, here's a community partner. Get to know them, go do work, ask questions, be engaged, and then figure out what the two of you are going to do to help support the work that they do in a way that makes each of you feel like you're contributing. That's a really unique piece for us, because so much of the community engaged learning work college students do across the US is directly related to their vocation. So if you're going to be in a business school and you go do an internship, that's community engaged learning. It's all about building those skills to get your job and be successful in your job. It's a little amorphous with us. So what I'm doing is helping that marketing student or that education student have an experience that shows that they are not just potentially going to be a better educator or better marketer because of their experiences and getting to, explore beyond the campus, but that they actually have something that the community needs. So I'm not necessarily worried about, future Teresa getting her first job in a marketing firm. I'm actually interested in future Teresa being better at that job than everybody else who's starting off. And I want future Teresa to know that at 22 years old, leaving Walsh University, there's a nonprofit board in her community that needs her skills and needs her perspectives. And she shouldn't wait until she's 40 years old before she decides to
Because
get
it's
that.
all those soft skills that they're developing, the collaboration, the problem
Yeah,
solving, even the emotional intelligence. You have a newfound empathy for these cultural problems that I'm sure will feed into improve whatever career you approach.
absolutely.
Yeah, really phenomenal. One of a kind program. We should be attracting students from all over the country. They need to hear about this program. So, who would be an ideal student from your perspective?
When I interview kids, I tell them this. I say, it's easy for me to find students who like to serve. Every school requires service hours, and you get a bunch of kids who feel really good about doing it. And I get students in my interview or in their resumes really loading it up with the number of service hours that they give. The important thing to me is, if you're a high school student and this sounds interesting to you, the biggest question is, what do you do when you serve? Do you count the number of boxes and decide where to position yourself for the perfect selfie afterwards, and then leave and just feel good about that you did something great? That's fantastic. Go keep serving. But I don't necessarily need that. What I need is the student who's feeding people at the community kitchen and wondering why all the people coming in that day are over the age of 60. Or why are there so many families with children who are hungry in my community? Or why does the food that we served look like this and not like what I have access to when I go to the grocery store? Or if a student's working in a community and they're part of a park cleanup crew, and every week they go out and do their park cleanup. Again, doesn't matter if you fill up 10 garbage bags or 3 garbage bags. I'm interested in the student that wonders, if people come to this park because they appreciate being in nature, why do they leave so much crap behind? Those types of students who are curious about the issues that they're serving in, those are who I want in this program. It doesn't matter if they're interested in also coming to Walsh to be a lacrosse player, a soccer player, be in the band, in the choir, campus ministry, any of those other attractions coming to Walsh. I want those kids who are curious about the community and think that they want to figure out how they can get involved in helping to address the issues.
So, Blouin Scholars Program, named after one of our former presidents, also a brother of Christian instruction, Brother Francis
Yeah.
Blouin. He's noted for bringing multiple Nobel Peace Prize winners to campus. Wonderful president and brother. Walsh was founded by the Brothers of Christian Instruction. So, how does this program carry on their legacy and our mission?
I love that you said legacy. The brothers aren't here anymore, and I got to interact very briefly as a master student here with a few of them who were still on campus. And after talking to alumni and who are both on campus as employees now or just in the community, I realized how significant their presence was here on campus. And while they're not here anymore, Blouin scholars are. And I actually I burden my Blouin scholars with the knowledge that they carry on that legacy. And I think the biggest thing for us is that Brother Francis believed that we should know more about the world than just is what is in front of us. He was a world traveler and supported projects all across the globe. Wanted to make sure that people at Walsh University had access to those global perspectives, bringing Nobel Prize winners here. So I carry that out in a much smaller way. I don't have those sorts of connections that he necessarily had, but connecting my students to great people, regardless of where they are on this planet, is part of the joy that I have in the program. But as a mission of the brothers, the education for the poor and education in general with principles and a faith base to that education is something that we carry out in the community. My job is not to create students who run out and have some sort of civil call to action for this particular issue. I don't need them to be warriors out in the community. I need them to be teachers. I want them to bring their skills to the table to help solve problems. I want them to be models of empathy and care and the Catholic social teaching principles for the folks that are working in their community. And I think that mission of education, regardless of what your job is, I think is an important way to visualize our work as civic-minded individuals who care about the common good. So,
And that we're lifelong learners as well.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Even you and I.
Yes, yeah.
It never stops. The learning never stops.
No, it doesn't.
Well, Dr. Morris, it's been such a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to someone. The fact that you are so deeply committed to our students, it shines through, and that you're so passionate about this program, the Blouin Scholars Program. What's next on the horizon for the program?
Well, I think this last I guess we're in somewhat of a phase where we received a donation a few years back from a local philanthropist, and that has funded us to take some time over these last few years to create a framework and explore its sustainability. I think things are changing in higher education. You've experienced that. I know I'm sure plenty of conversations in the cabinet meetings point to that. I think it's impacting our community as well. Some of those same challenges, and so what I'm tasked with at the moment is trying to figure out a model for this program that has some long-term sustainability,
Sure.
something that still carries the legacy of the brothers, but also, has maybe a stronger connection to community impacts. So one of the things that folks will start seeing looking at the Blouin Scholars Program is that we're probably doing less whole group reports or impacts or outputs and shrinking that into smaller groups with individual investigative journeys. So, that's me kind of trying to figure out a way to help our students see a more direct link between the Blouin Scholars Program and their future as an individual, as opposed to just, continuing to care and work in this topic area in our community, but rather to see themselves as part of that solution. And then what that also does is it allows us to more clearly articulate impacts in the community. Because around a particular topic, it's one thing for me to say with the students who are studying housing and neighborhood development, yeah, we're working with Habitat for Humanity, community building partnerships, and ICANN housing. It's different when I can say specifically that there are 13 different investigations that are going on related to those three partners, or 13 different investigations happening with 13 different partners. We get to more clearly articulate where the impacts are directly in our community with our student work, but then we're also able to, I think, track better the outputs or of our student work as they carry forward as young professionals and alumni.
Well, you're certainly doing great work, and viewers, listeners can learn more about our Blouin Scholars Program on our website at walsh.edu. But in the meantime, I thank you for taking the time today to talk with us and so we can learn about this wonderful program we have here at Walsh University. And with that, I will say we'll sign off for CavChats, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes, been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.